We welcome you to training tape from the Life Training Seminar, Part 2 of Juba Cleanse Your Liver, a highly informative lecture by Gary Young on the need to cleanse our liver and thereby affect our emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And now here's Gary to share this important information.
Now, we haven't finished on the liver, and we're going to push fast and furious today to see if we can get through the liver. And if we succeed, then we'll be able to start on the colon tomorrow. And if we're successful, we'll move on. Could be the biggest move of your life. You know, on all my travels and the old people that I interviewed throughout the various countries, it was most interesting because I had a series of questions that I would go through and ask all of them, as well as the questions the physician that I hired to travel with me would go through and ask. And the physician in Azerbaijan and Vilcabamba and Hunza, they just carried a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff with them and just did simple things, you know, cardiac values and respiratory values and pulse and blood pressures, etc. So just the simple things that we could do, but the things that are really significant and change in elderly people very quickly. Hearing, eyesight, and it was most amazing to see these people, you know, 130, 140 years old that had normal blood pressure, 120, 130 over 75, 125. That was pretty much the range for all of them. And, you know, the resting pulse rate, 60, 62, a resting pulse rate of a very, very healthy middle-aged person. And in Azerbaijan, in the Talish Mountains, there was only one out of 100 people that I met that put glasses on to read the newspaper at over 100 years of age. Most amazing. I never found one person that had liver spots, never had complaints of urinary problems or digestive problems, constipation, diarrhea. You know, the things that we see in America with young adults, hormonal problems. That was difficult to really evaluate because not too many of them really wanted to talk about their sex life and activities. Only one person actually that really expressed his feelings about it. He was 128 and he was frustrated because it was diminishing. And his sex activity was 4 times a week. It was diminishing. I didn't ask him what it was before he hit 128. But his wife turned very red-faced in that conversation. She didn't disagree. So who knows what the feelings were. I asked him if he felt an active sex life was important for longevity. He said, absolutely. Why do you think I'm concerned? But it was an area that I was not able to really get a lot of information. But what I did gain from my interviews with these people, that the women didn't go through menopause until in their 70s and 80s. And as those of you who are at convention know, the one lady was 82 when she had her last child, and the other one was 73 when she had her last child. Most of them were still bearing children in their mid to late 60s. So, ladies, there's still hope for you, and hope for our future. I can tell you this, that the children from 2 generations ago are much healthier children than the children being born in our world today. And there's something significant about Sarah having a baby after 80. I feel it more and more all the time, and especially as I ponder frequently about my experiences in the Talish Mountains in Hunza land and in Yinchuan. The women there also bearing children in their 60s. Not as common as in the Talish Mountains. They're more educated. It's interesting how education interferes with that, but whatever it may be. But what I see out of it, and it makes more sense to me now that Mary and I have had Jacob, of seeing the importance of having more maturity with childbearing and child rearing. Certainly you learn from your mistakes or your inadequate choices. I mean, we're supposed to, and I certainly believe that I have. I find it's still a challenge raising a child at my age. I see a little boy that is extremely secure. I think you probably realize that when you see him unafraid of anyone and very secure and coming up and talking to you and being in your space. That has a double side to it too, because he knows no fear, and it concerns us if he goes off with a stranger naturally. I had a real fright in Jackson Hole this winter. We were there skiing, and I was in the ski shop trying on a different pair of ski boots, and he was standing right beside me, and he was hanging onto my pants as I was signing the papers. This lady walked in ski clothing, and she was talking to him. He was talking to her just as freely as could be, and he let go of my pants, and the second that it took me to finish signing my name while he let go of my pants, I turned around and he was gone, and she was gone. needless to say, my heart went into my throat, and I just ran to the front door, and she was not in sight, nowhere. And I ran up the sidewalk a ways. She was not in sight. I ran down the sidewalk, not in sight. I ran back in, and I just said to the few places, help me find my son. And they'd all seen him standing there, and they were shocked that he was gone that quick as well. Well, you can imagine what raced through my mind, seeing this woman standing there talking to him, and then they both are gone at the same time. Yeah, Mary says that I don't experience fear. She had no idea. And I had to grab a hold of that and say, no, I will only expect the right outcome, and I'll accept nothing else. And breathe deep. And I went back outside. The other guy says, we'll look in here, you go. And I went all the way up the restaurant and just scanned the whole area. And I saw the woman way up by one of the lifts, and everything appeared to be normal. I thought, no, this can't be. And I ran back down and into the store, and the one gentleman who was helping me came from the other part of the store, the clothing part, with Jacob on his finger. And he just around the corner and into the clothing part and stood up in the clothes and was hiding. He was having a great time. But I share that with you just for a simple analogy of how easy it is to allow the natural responses that we have take control and dictate to us the worst case scenario, and to where we go into a panic mode. And it's really important to stop and just breathe and take control of that and take charge of that, because if you do not, there are chemical things that happen in your body, in your mind, in your brain, and in the liver, and then it goes to the adrenals, and it changes body chemistry very quickly. If you allow that to happen and you don't take control and pull it back, then that chemistry change that takes place alters the brain function to the point to where it alters cell function. And again, transcribes, because it literally alters the transcriptase enzyme that does the memory encoding in the memory of the DNA in the telomeres. And you can stop that and you can change it, but only when you recognize it and you breathe and blow it off, and then set your mind for what it is that you will accept and nothing else. It's so important for us when we're moving forward to stop, be calm, be still, and not go into the panic mode that we're all programmed to do. And we do that because that's how we're taught. And we need to spend more of our time backing ourselves out of that space. And it's interesting how we also can do it for others that are not as close to us, but those who are very close to us, sometimes we're not able to, because we allow emotion and predetermined ideas to interfere with that information coming in. Folks, I hope you're understanding what I'm saying, because in the future, the near future, many of you are going to be challenged with your ability to listen to the unsaid thing and to be able to have the discernment to decipher what it means in your future benefit and well-being. You may be getting ready to board an airplane with a lot of anxiousness because you're going to see your grandchildren, or your mother who is in a hospital dying, or whatever. And your spirit guardians are there to watch over you. It's important for you to learn to listen and learn to feel, because they will direct you. And please understand, I'm not here to change your belief system. I'm just here to share with you and expand it if that feels right. And we do always respond to negative thought, negative feeling, and negative conversation first before we think. And if we can learn to just breathe and engage the brain while we're breathing and clear that out, you'll be amazed at what can come in and all the wonderful things that can happen. And I love those experiences. I truly love them, because they're so empowering in what they can teach us if we sit back after the experience, even if we really get into it and go all the way, which we do 99% of the time. And that's okay. Don't ever beat up on yourself for going there, because it's just okay. The more you go, the more you learn, and the more you can look at it. And when you can sit back after it's over and then kind of just analytically pick it apart and say, okay, which piece really fit, and what was it that I really need to learn from this and gain from it, and how does it feel now, knowing how ridiculous I was for behaving that way. And we wind up beating up on ourselves the most, don't we? And the whole time we're doing this whole routine, guess what we're doing? We're overloading the liver, and we're overloading the DNA and the telomeres, and we're altering the transcriptase enzyme in the transcribing of incorrect information that replicates in our bodies called fear. And we build more and more and more of that, and we respond from that. You know, I don't have a fear of the dark. I don't have a fear of being jumped in an alley or, you know, things like that. But when it comes to Mary or Jacob, there's a different level there. And so we all have our different experiences in fear. But the bottom line is it all produces the same outcome in every person. When you go into that mode of, you are absolutely helpless at that moment. And so it's a lot better, you know, if one can overcome that. And it's true with so many things that we experience in life. And all that you go through has such an impact on your well-being and how you respond. One of the great values that you may experience if we choose to do the fire walk will be being in a moment of feeling intense fear and learning how to take control of that and how to use that energy to empower you and how to convert it rather than let it become a fear that feeds that which already exists, that stops you from doing the impossible. And folks, in this world today, we're not out there crossing the plains and dodging arrows and lifting wagons over rocks and dealing with malaria or whatever it happens to be. But we're dealing with a whole nother set of adventures that when I compare what we're faced with compared to what our ancestors were faced with, I would trade them in a heartbeat. This I want you to know, realizing how powerful you are that you chose to come at this time. You do have the strength because of knowing that to endure all things, because the ultimate accomplishment in this life is being able to be fulfilled, and fulfilling to others has tremendous value. So as we focus on cleansing the mind and the cells of traumas and emotional memories of negative magnitude, and we cleanse our cells and bodies of the impurities physically, you will feel and sense a new empowering dimension in your life. And that will be the mind opening to creativity and to a vast expansion of possibilities. When we're toxic, and the more toxic we are, the more fear we have. Did you know that? Because the two go together. Toxicity creates fear, and fear creates toxicity. And so the less toxic you are, the less fear you'll experience. How does that happen? Part of it is in when you're cleansed, in the true sense of cleansed, then you are closer to your Father. And the closer you are to the Father, the more He can work through you and in you, and the more secure and security you will experience to where you won't feel the sense of fear. As He has said many times, my spirit will not dwell in an unclean temple. So if we want the fulfillment of Father as much as humanly possible in this earth plane, then cleansing and preparing for that is where you first start. If you want to have that clear communication, then cleansing is where you start. You can't be taking adulterants into your body, foods that are abomination. In Deuteronomy, it talks very clearly in chapter 7 about not partaking of foods that are abomination to the body. And you need to read that and be real clear about how that takes away the Spirit of God. You know, coffee, tobacco, sugar, white flour, fried foods, any substance that alters the healthy process of the cell is an abomination to the Lord. So how can you ask Him to come and dwell with you and give you intuition and direction if you're defiling the temple doing so? How can you be of service to someone else if you're doing it to yourself? You first have to, as I feel, that Christ did, and that is teach by example. If you don't walk your talk, then don't talk. It's very, very important. We have so much need in our world today to have people doing that. And Young Living is perhaps the only company in the world that's really promoting that and teaching that and living that. And you're all part of that. And you reflect that every day in every way, wherever you go. Now, going back to product and continuing with the liver process, there's another one that I haven't mentioned that is very, very powerful for the cleansing of the liver, and that's sulfur zyme. MSM, which is in the sulfurzyme, is a very powerful agent for the cleansing of the liver and the rebuilding of liver cells. What I do, and I'll just share a little with you of my routine that I've been doing for several months now. In the morning when I get up, I have my lemon and my water. And then I have a 54-ounce bottle that I take to the gym with me. Sometimes I will put berry juice, 4 ounces to 6 ounces of berry juice in that, because when you're working out, it's really important to keep your glucose levels up so your body can utilize and take the protein in. It takes sugar, glucose, to pull protein into the cell. It takes 12 hours for protein to digest, assimilate, and go into the body. So if you've eaten protein for breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock is next morning is when that glucose is going to pull that protein into the cell. Now, if you have a pre-digested protein, like at night, depending on what you're doing, like 11 o'clock at night, just before I go to bed, I'll have a Power Meal drink, because that's a pre-digested vegetarian protein. Sometimes I'll put a scoop of Whey Fit with it, about 2/3 of the time I don't. And the body can pull that in with the protein from the morning before. And so having berry young juice to help hold that glucose level sustained while you're doing your aerobics or your cardio or your strength training pulls that protein into the cell very, very nicely and efficiently. And so I'll do that. Sometimes, and more often than not, I'll put Coral C in my drink. Now, Marvin got me started doing this a few weeks ago because I was going up and my morning drink was 2 scoops of Power Meal and 2 scoops of Whey Fit with a half a scoop of Aminotech, 2 tablespoons of Coral C and 2 tablespoons of sulfurzyme and 2 tablespoons of ICP and a tablespoon of essential omegas, and that was my toddy in the morning. And I found that it was overloading my liver. And so I do my Coral C in the morning now, separate from my drink. And it's working very, very well. Just share with you a little bit of the research on Coral C. Calcium is extremely important, as you all know, and plays a major role. Now, there are a lot of people that are saying, well, calcium cures this and this and this and this, and there's 200 things that calcium cures. That's not correct. But indirectly, it can have an effect on many, many things in the body. Calcium is a nutrient of the decade, a substance with such diverse roles in the body that virtually no major organ system escapes its influence. Low calcium intakes are linked to osteoporosis, high blood pressure, colon cancer, and kidney stones. Calcium of coral origin is better absorbed from the intestine than calcium of calcium carbonate origin. Coral calcium, consisting of calcium and trace element, activates NK cells and macrophages and plays a supportive role in inhibiting the metastasis of cancer cells in the lungs. Dr. Martin Lipkin, Strang Cancer Research Laboratory, reported that calcium supplements could inhibit colonic cell proliferation in people susceptible to colon cancer and might also prevent cancer in such organs as breast, prostate, and pancreas. The National Library of Medicine has 45 studies documenting the use of coral calcium as a bone graft substitute. 3 diterpene isolates from coral calcium have positive cardiac and vascular response in animal studies. Some coral calcium is not cleaned, but is baked at 900 centigrade in activating natural nutrients and ground at 200 to 400 mesh. Now, many of you have asked, why is ours so expensive? This is where it comes in. Your coral calcium is cleaned, not baked, and it's ground at 2,000 mesh for optimal absorption. Now, folks, this is something that, and this applies to your mineral essence as well, and I want you to know this. There's a couple of things that go on that's very, very important in the utilization of minerals, calcium being one of them. Your mineral essence, which is an ionic mineral taken from the sea vegetation of the Salt Lake sea waters, has a very, very small molecular structure. It conducts electricity and electrolytic exchange. Minerals, including calcium, that are mined from a rock base, has a very, very large molecular structure and does not have an ion exchange. And they're not in a chelated form. Ionic minerals are in a chelated form, meaning they have been wrapped with amino acids for conversion and assimilation. That is how minerals are utilized by the amino acid chain that bonds to that mineral. Now, when you have minerals that are too large, like the calcium ground at 200 to 400 mesh, those minerals will go to the cell, and they're not able to absorb through the cell wall. So they will cluster around the outside of the cell. Now, people say, but when I took those minerals, I felt energy and I felt better. And you're going to have that argument. This is the reason that they felt better. Minerals are tremendous conductors and transmuters of energy. And when those minerals, even though they don't go in the cell, but they go around the cell, they will increase the cell energy in that cell at the moment. Now here's where the conflict comes. The longer you take a product, a mineral particularly, that does not assimilate and does not go through the cell wall, you get an accumulation. Colloidal silver is another one of these minerals that does this very thing. It will not go through the cell wall. It stays on the outside. When you get an accumulation factor to where you go into cell overload, what it does, it blocks the NNA pump in the cell wall from discharging excess sodium out of the cell. How does it do that? It changes the electrical exchange inside the cell, and the NNA pump shuts down. So the sodium stays in the cell instead of discharging out of the cell. When that happens, it alters the cell two ways. One, it alters the sodium-potassium ratio, but it also alters it by its frequency, because now it goes into a dextrorotary rotation, and the cell starts to mutate and break down. Now, depending on your age, your environment, your lifestyle, your dietary intake, all of those things will determine whether it takes 30 days or 230 days before your cells start to respond in a negative way to a mineral that does not assimilate in the cell wall. And so in the beginning, people will feel this pickup because of that electrical exchange into the cell in the beginning. And then all of a sudden they say, well, gee, I don't feel like I'm getting benefit from it. They're not. It goes the other way, but it takes several months sometimes before that happens. So having a mineral that is either in an ion form or chelated form, or in this case both, ground to a finer mesh, 2,000. At 1,000 it goes in the cell wall. I wanted to be sure that we had maximum absorption, so I had them take it to 2,000 mesh. And the results have been phenomenal with it naturally. So it absorbs, it goes in. It increases the ion exchange, and with the calcium going in the cell, it increases the action of the NNA pump and discharges more excess sodium out of the cell. So you have a greater energy increase because now the cell has the potential with the potassium to increase adenosine triphosphate, which is the ATP or the cell fuel for the cell that gives us energy. So that's really, really critical. And the Coral C is a tremendous product. And it's one that, as I've been working with it more and more the last couple of years, that I am seeing a product that everyone needs to be utilizing more than they have been in the past. And it makes muscle tiredness and soreness diminish much quicker because it takes the lactic acid out. It improves heart and cardiovascular function substantially. It improves hair and teeth and bones throughout the body. So no matter what you're doing, the Coral C is something that I would recommend everyone utilize on a daily basis. And how much should you use of Coral C? I do 2 tablespoons a day. Now, my body hasn't told me that it's at that point where I've had enough and I need to cut back yet. When it does, then I will. Do I have an idea when that'll happen? No, I don't. It depends on the demands that you put on your body and the condition that you're in at the time. But I've had a wonderful experience in just another level of healing in my process since I've been using the Coral C and sulfurzyme together. I do 2 tablespoons of sulfurzyme every morning without fail. For a long time I did it off and on. I didn't do it religious. I didn't do it consistently. And last year when I really started studying more in depth about liver function and cleansing the liver and the emotions anchored in the liver, then I went to sulfurzyme every single morning. It used to taste terrible. Now it tastes good. I don't mind it at all. This is another thing that you'll find, that when your body has a deficiency, the things normally that will meet the deficiency normally don't taste good in the beginning. And so if you take sulfurzyme or Coral C or something like that, and it's kind of yuck, power meal, it's because your body really needs it. And your body's gone out of balance. I watched Jacob, and it's such a testimony to what I'm saying, because here's a little boy that came into the world not knowing that sulfurzyme tasted bad. Here's a little boy that didn't know power meal didn't taste like frosted flakes, I guess. And he thinks it all tastes good. Here's a little boy that's 29 months old and eats raw horseradish. And sucking on a lemon is a delicacy to him because he doesn't know it doesn't taste bad, and he hasn't been programmed that it shouldn't taste good or whatever. Here's a little boy that when he tastes something that has sugar on it, he spits it out. And Mary and I, and Mary's been even more strict with him than I have, because she'll put 1 drop of agave on his cereal in the morning and I'll put 10. And she says, honey, I don't want him to develop a taste for sweets. And I said, well, how else is he going to find a girl? As a man cannot live by oatmeal alone. So he does. I mean, sometimes I get the feeling guilty because Mary puts his bowl of oatmeal in front of him in the morning and literally squirts maybe a half a teaspoon of agave on it, and he chows it down, and I've got to put at least a tablespoon on mine to get it down. Why? Because I altered my taste buds, and I'm out of balance. When it comes to oatmeal and quinoa, I might be out of balance for a long time. But I don't know how many of you eat quinoa and amaranth and oatmeal every morning for breakfast, but Jacob does, and we do almost every morning. He started eating oatmeal when he was 6 weeks old and never had any sweetener on it at that age. And so he doesn't need a sweetener on it. He'll eat it without anything, right out of the pan. A few weeks ago, we were meeting with some people on a building that we were looking at. And they took us into their conference room, and they bought some crackers and some snacks and that set out for us, and they knew that, we were weird. And so they got some wheat thins. But they also bought a box of Fig Newtons, the commercial Fig Newtons. Well, we buy figs from the health food store that are made with wheat and raspberry and apple, and sort of thing, and they're a little different, but they look the same to a little boy. Well, he went over and took one, and he took a bite out of it before I realized he'd taken it out of the container, and I thought, oh my goodness, if Mary comes in and sees I let him have that Fig Newton. I was more afraid of her reaction than I was what was going to happen to Jacob. He just chewed on it 2 or 3 times, and he'd come over, and I was talking to the people, and he taps me on my arm, Daddy. And I look down and said, what, son? He's like, I put my hand out, and and the rest of Fig Newton was laid on the chair. So we feel tremendously blessed that through Mary's commitment and ours together in doing what we felt was right for this little boy, that he has truly developed the taste buds that we desire for him to have. He loves Tabasco sauce. He likes hot salsa. And, all the things that babies shouldn't like, he just absolutely enjoys. In our world today, it would be called strange, weird, or unusual. But, folks, I really believe the way Jacob is how every child should be. Growing up knowing what the taste of real value is and disliking that causes death. And only we as parents can make that different. My great uncle, and I'm going to share this with you because I feel it's very significant and not because of any religious connection. That's not the purpose. But he wrote a book 150 years ago called The Discourses of Brigham Young. And in that book, there's a chapter on nutrition and diet. And it is so amazing to me to read that was written and published 150 years ago, of how he talked about how parents then were altering the life expectancy of their children with the plum puddings and the sweet cakes and the salt porks that they were feeding then. Now, can you imagine a man 150 years ago telling the people to quit feeding the children this garbage? And look at what we have today. And he says in that book that if mothers would stop doing this to their children, that it would take 5 generations to return them back to longevity. I mean, here was a man that had a grade 3 education, teaching the people about nutrition. And it pains me inside today to see the people totally ignore those teachings. For me, not just because he's my uncle, but because of the words of wisdom that are absolute truth and fact. And he talks about in there how Moses condemned pork. And in his opinion, that he agreed with Moses and that it was an abomination to the temple of God to partake of pork, because pork is the dirtiest meat and contains the most diseases of any flesh on the land. And I love reading the writings from great men, regardless of what religious faith they practice. God put a lot of great men on this earth for all of us to learn from. We need not to be so closed-minded that because they've practiced a certain faith that we don't want to listen. Robert Schuller has been a great mentor to me over the years. I admire him and I respect him for the things that he has taught me. And yet there's a lot of people that think he's a heretic. Well, I associate with that, so I don't have a problem with it. But folks, learn from all the great people that you can learn from, regardless of what religion they may profess that may not agree with you. As we look at these things and we come to an understanding of why our bodies are altered, let's talk a minute about high-protein diets. Now, you've been hearing me for the last couple of years talking about increasing your protein intake. I mentioned earlier today about the risk and the fine line and where you can cross over that line. I practiced vegetarianism for 27 years. I was a very, very strict vegetarian for 15 of those 27 years. It served me extremely well. It saved my life. And when I mean strict, 90% of the food that went in my mouth was raw and unprocessed. I have to tell you that I also felt the best I ever felt in my life during that time. However, there are factors to keep in mind. During that time, I was also in my 20s and 30s, the prime of life for normal hormone production and balance. Now that I'm over the hill, and it's wonderful being over the hill. I tell you folks, for those of you who haven't made it there yet, it is a grand feeling to be over the hill. To know that I'm on the downhill slide with the world by the tail, going at 100 miles an hour, is a great feeling. But when you pass 35, and that's not over the hill. What is over the hill today in our society? 40. Some consider 50. Depends on how close you are to the hill. It's all in how you interpret it. I figure that it's taken me 50 years to learn enough that the next 50 I might make a few less mistakes. And we do. We utilize our youth to make our old age miserable. Mary says old age is youthful abuse. It's both. But it doesn't have to be. We can learn from the mistakes of our youth to make our old age more enjoyable and more successful. And I can tell you this day at 54 that I have more strength and more muscle size than I had when I was 20. And when I was 20, I felt I could conquer the world. And that's exciting to me because of what I've been through and what I've had to go through in my life. To know at my age, I can still grow and develop and build and become that which I was told was impossible. And I'm really happy with that. But it's been with a lot of work, and it takes a lot of work. Nothing comes free. But through freedom, many things come. And I say that because I believe very strongly that health is your key to freedom. But looking at that and high protein, and how does that all come to play? If you're eating a high protein diet because you're a carbohydrate addict, you're going to have problems. Anytime you go out of balance, you're going to have problems in life. Sooner or later, it'll catch up to you. Now, what is a high protein diet, and what does it consist of? Look at the Atkins book. If you haven't read it, buy it, read it. Get familiar with these things. Become educated so you know, and you can draw your own conclusions. But the Atkins diet, the Pritikin diet are very high protein diets. Now, here's the thing that is important for you to understand. If you are physically active, you can burn 6 times more protein than a sedentary person can. And that's where it crosses the line. And when you're 20 to 35, you don't need the heavy proteins to manufacture hormones. But when your hormone levels start decreasing and you're a vegetarian, you're going to have a problem because your body's not going to manufacture hormones adequately. In the exception of a vegetarian who understands food combining and knows how to get adequate protein out of food combining and eats every 2 hours. And if not, they're going to go into a hormonal dive. That can be devastating. And what I see with a lot of vegetarians, over 40, ovarian cancer and prostate cancer. Why? Because of the rapid decline in hormones for maintaining that balance. So does that mean everybody that's a vegetarian should start eating meat? No. It means that you need to learn your body. And if you choose to be a vegetarian for various other reasons than just dietary reasons, maybe it's a religious reason, and for many people it is. If it is, just be aware and be conscious that after 35, your hormone production starts going this way. Hormones are made from protein. And if you're not getting adequate protein, then your hormone production is going to start decreasing. And you can put yourself into a position of having a hormone deficiency that will throw your whole body out of balance. Even HGH, which regulates immune function, depends on protein brain utilization. All right? So finding that correct balance is really, really crucial. Now, in the athletic world, the bodybuilding world, we're told that if you're physically active, you should consume 1 gram of protein for 1 pound of body weight. So if you're 150 pounds, you should eat 150 grams of protein a day. Now, I want you to be real clear, again, about your intake of protein. Know your blood type. Are you an O, an A, or a B? Now, for a couple of years, as I ventured into this new world of bodybuilding, I kind of listened to what was being said because I didn't know different. I'd never been here before. So I've got to know, I've got to experiment, I've got to experience. Otherwise, how can I teach? And so I went to the 1 gram of protein a day, and I was doing that with egg white and with ground chicken and with power meal and whey and yogurt. And, of course, everything that we do in our home is organic. We don't have anything in our home that's not organic. We grow a garden 12 months out of the year, and we eat out of our garden 12 months out of the year. But organic cottage cheese, these things are very important, and they're good protein sources. And so I was pushing my protein intake up to 200 grams a day while I was really working hard. And last year, from January to June, when Rob and I competed in the NPC, that's where I was pushing it. Even though I wasn't 200 pounds, I was pushing it to 200 to 250 grams of protein a day because I wanted to put on more size. I wanted to feed the muscle. And I gained, and after that competition was over, I just plateaued. I stopped, and I felt my body going into a toxic overload. And that was my learning curve. I'm working, but I'm not gaining. I just stayed there. And so in November, this is not working. I'm an A blood type. I don't need that much protein. So I cut my protein down to 150 to 160 grams a day. Now, last week when I weighed in, I was 196 pounds. And I'm at about 10% body fat right now. So I'm carrying a little extra fat than I will be for competition. But I cut that protein intake down. I changed my workout program, and in 3 months, I increased my chest size 2 inches and my biceps 3/4 of an inch. So why did that change and what happened there? It's the body's ability to utilize the protein. And if you go in, again, overloading the liver, then your body doesn't just say, okay, I'm not utilizing 50 grams of protein here. The liver shuts down to utilization of that protein. So it compromises your entire outcome, and you deal with that. Now, what happens when you go into a protein overload? High protein diets can create colon toxicity and liver toxicity, especially diets rich in meat. Now, I really advocate staying away from red meats, except sparingly. Your fishes, your chicken, your white meats, you can consume a little bit more, but red meats are much harder to digest. They're much more taxing to the liver, so be cautious. And what happens here, the amino acid of tyrosine and tryptophan, which are converted from red meats, particularly red meats, they are the mood-elevating amino acids that go to the brain, and they suppress serotonin levels and brain function and decrease the mood, so you can go into a sense of feeling depressed in a protein overload. So that's one of the ways of knowing that you're going into a protein overload, is when you start noticing that you're just kind of feeling down. You're eating well, you're feeling well physically, but mentally you're just kind of down. And so back off the protein and look at how you're utilizing protein. Now, for an A-type, protein in the morning. And I worked with a lot of different ways of working my diet around to see what's most efficient for an A-type. I find, as I mentioned, if I do berry young juice with my water in the morning while I'm working out, I have tremendous energy. It maintains the glucose levels. It pulls that protein from the morning before into the cell very efficiently. And I'm finding that when I do that, I grow better. I get that protein in there. Putting the Coral C in with my drink in the morning, and I do 6 dropperfuls of mineral essence in that same drink. So I'm getting my full shot of minerals and calcium in the morning right there in that workout. And when you're working out and you're sweating and you're perspiring and you're increasing your circulation, that's when your body is really pulling it in and you're really getting that maximum absorption from it. And you get so much more benefit. And then after my workout, I come up and I make my drink, which is 2 scoops of Whey Fit, 1 to 2 scoops of Power Meal, just depending on how I'm feeling. And I was doing a scoop of AminoTech. I've stopped doing that now. And what I do is I mix my drink for the day and I put my AminoTech in that drink. And so I'm spreading it out through the entire day. So I'm getting more sustained release with the amino acids, and particularly the creatine, throughout the day rather than just taking one big shot of it in the morning. And I'm finding, for me, I'm getting much more utilization of it that way. And so I do my Power Meal, my Whey Fit, my Sulfurzyme, and I'm not religious every morning with essential omegas. I have a real struggle with that one. I've never liked orange flavoring. Jacob, he embarrasses me. He does a teaspoon every single morning, just. And so I say, son, why don't you do daddy's? So mommy and Jacob take enough for daddy. But it's really wonderful. But that's my drink in the morning. And then I go and handle my phone calls or whatever and shower and change and whatever my activities. And then generally about 2 hours later I have my breakfast. And at my breakfast I do my eggs, and I always do onions. Onions are so good. Organic onions are so important for that ascorbic acid, and they're a good antioxidant, and they're good for the circulatory system. And I just saute the onions just lightly. And then I saute the ground chicken a little bit, mix them together, and then I pour my egg white over top of the ground chicken and the onion, and put a little seasoning on it, and that's my breakfast. Mary, she makes cereal every morning, and I have a little of that to balance the carbs with the protein. And I do about 8 ounces of the mixed cereal, which is oatmeal, quinoa, amaranth, and wheat. And it's really been a delicious treat recently because we got our wheat and oats from the farm that we harvest this summer, and we got it clean. And we're grinding that and having that organic wheat and oat with our cereal in the morning now. And you can really tell the difference with wholesome food like that. You can feel the energy from it. And so I'll do about 8 ounces of that, and I eat about 6 to 8 ounces of the ground chicken and egg white. I do about a half a cup of egg white with that, and sometimes I'll break an egg or two in with it, so I've got the yolk in there, but more egg white. And it's wonderful to the taste. I'll put a little ginger curry sauce on it, give it a little flavor. Curry and ginger is really good for the digestive system. So there's things that you can do. Now, the other thing that I've been doing with Mary, the last few weeks I've been writing recipes for the first time in my life. But I've never been a recipe writer, and I've been asked hundreds and hundreds of times to write a book. I can't stand recipes because I've never cooked by one. Anybody that's ever eaten my waffles would know that. But it's just a shake of this and a touch of that and a scoop of this and whatever. But I've sat down and I've gotten serious and on my flight trips, and I've started writing recipes. I focused on writing recipes for a liver diet. Because this is what I feel really strong about. I feel really strong that it's not about cleansing the liver only, but it's about feeding the liver every day. And so I've been going through and taking all the foods that cleanse and build liver function, support liver function, and been writing recipes. And when we get home from Cancun and Mary goes to work and trying out my recipes, she thinks and feels they're going to be good. They're very interesting. But there are a lot of wonderful foods for nurturing and feeding the liver. And of course, your greens, your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, your cabbage, your cauliflower are foods that cleanse and feed the liver. Radishes, very, very supporting to the liver. Red beets, one of the best liver foods that exist. And you put red beets and radishes together with cucumber. You've got a fabulous, and you can do that as a cold vegetable for a salad type over romaine lettuce with bean sprouts, and you've got one of the most beautiful liver-supporting foods that you could eat. And so this is the direction that I'm going in now, is creating a program where we will cleanse and feed the liver-supporting foods, and keep that building and going forward. So those are the things that are really important. People with colon dysfunction and bowel disorders suffer from varying levels of depression. Spastic colons, colitis, Crohn's disease, chronic constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, diarrhea. These compromising problems create a nutrition deficiency, poor assimilation of your B vitamins. B6 and B12 particularly are converted and assimilated through the transverse colon to the pancreas to support insulin production. And the moment that compromises, then that insulin production is compromised and you're into a hypoglycemic dive. And from there it goes on into depression. Poor sleep patterns, increased cortisol levels. How many of you have poor sleep patterns? Okay, so when that happens, cortisol levels go up, stress levels go up. And it's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the sleep patterns come first that caused the cortisol levels to go up, or did the cortisol levels come up and cause the sleep deprivation? Only you would know based on your past history. But it's very crucial to identify that, and those of us who are over 35 need to really be conscious of our stress levels. Now, let me just take a moment there. I don't want to mislead you thinking that stress causes cortisol. It's not stress that causes cortisol, it's sustained stress. All right, we all have stress. It's a part of our life, and it's a natural part of our environment, and we're supposed to have it. Stress can be your greatest friend, in my opinion, if you're controlling it, because stress can move you to take action. And when you use stress to move you to take action, then stress becomes your friend. So utilize it to be your best friend. If stress killed people, I would have been dead a long time ago. Okay, now here's another thing. How many of you experience muscle aches and pains from unknown origin? Okay, quite a few of you. Keep this in mind. Increased cortisol levels increases muscle and joint pain. So another reason to pay attention to that and keep that down. And this is where we go to Cortistop. Now, how many are using Cortistop? Okay, quite a few of you. Cortistop is a profound product and is most effective. We did the research at the clinic on Cortistop last year, and we saw of the 9 subjects that were tested on Cortistop, it was effective 9 out of 9 in decreasing cortisol levels. So really profound. Now, I'm going to share this with you, and I don't know if anyone else had this experience. Can you overdose on Cortistop? Yes, you overdose on anything. How will you know if you've overdosed on cortisol? Reoccurring headaches. So if you're taking like 2 cortisol morning, 2 cortisol at night, and you've been doing this for a while, and all of a sudden you start noticing you get a headache an hour after you take it, and it's not real sharp, just kind of a dull headache in the front here, then you've overloaded your liver on cortisol, so back off, and that can happen. I don't recommend anyone take cortisol 7 days a week, consistent. Work with your body. Your cortisol levels peak about 6 o'clock in the morning. It's good if you take cortisol at night, so it's in the body to help counter the excessive cortisol levels that happen in the morning and bring it back down if it goes into a sustained level. Now, if you're under tremendous stress, then cortisol is going to be really, really important for you. There are a lot of women, and I don't know if anyone here in this room, if so, raise your hand. A lot of women reporting to the office of remarkable weight reduction using cortisol. Anybody here had that experience? Okay, one lady here that has had that experience. So this has been really remarkable. Why? Because cortisol reduces cortisol. Excessive cortisol increases weight gain. It is the enzyme, we call it the fat storing enzyme, cortisol. So that has really been very successful in some women. So just something to look at there. Now, when I know that I'm in a stress situation, then I'll take cortisol 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, and I'll do it until the stress level modulates. And then I'll drop off to 1, and then I'll take it maybe every other day. Or I'll run it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I stop it for a couple of weeks. I don't stay on it consistently. And, I keep thinking of my liver, and not going into overload. So watch that, pay attention. It's most important to understand that we can overload that liver very, very easily. When a child endures long periods of stress, the brain function can become altered, causing future behavioral and mood problems. Now, when this happens with a child, and I think most of you here that are parents have noticed that when a child is under stress, they're constipated, true or false? It's just automatic. When a child's stressed, their experience is constipation. Those two things alter the brain chemistry in that child, and behavior problems are the end result. And so I find it really frustrating when I have mothers come to me with their children. We had a situation here, a friend of Mary's brought her daughter and granddaughter to our house. She was 2 years old, and she was covered from her hair to her toes in a horrible, almost a psoriasis condition. And they had her on cortisone creams and prednisone creams, and she was on a prescription drug that she was giving her a liquid out of a bottle. I don't remember the name of the prescription drug. And it was horrible. I mean, some of the sores were just oozing. And the first thing I said to the mother, I said, how many bowel movements a day does this child have? And she says, well, once every 7 to 10 days. And I said, this is insanity. And she says, well, I was just to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said if the baby has a bowel movement every 7 to 10 days, that's sufficient. This was a pediatrician. I said to her, I was so mad. I should go back to your pediatrician and tell him not to crap for 10 days and see how he'd feel. Normal function for a child is every 2 hours, or certainly within 30 minutes of every time you take in food, there should be some discharge. And that's normal bowel function. And we hold it. And then we wonder why our children are on Ritalin, because we have these altered mood functions. Well, I told the mother this. I put the child on a program, and the child loaded its diaper 3 and 4 times a day, every day for weeks. Then it finally started going into a natural bowel movement 3 and 4 times a day. But after, 6 weeks? About 6 weeks, the rash, the oozing sores, everything totally cleared, and the child has beautiful skin today. And the mother hasn't been back to the doctor. Life is simple. We make it complicated. Now, along with constipation, and this is something that is very common with women, is constipation, and particularly during pregnancy. 37% of women suffering depression had significant physical and sexual abuse by age 21. 37%. And in every single case where I have dealt with a woman who has had depression related to physical or sexual abuse, she's got a history of constipation in every single case, no exception. So these are things, to look at. And we're told that during pregnancy, it's okay if you don't go every day. During pregnancy, you should go more. because you're generally taking in more. You have more responsibility to filter the waste from the baby that's going back out through the blood as well. And all of that's going back to the liver. That's why women who have been mothers have a greater liver overload than men do. Because once a woman has had 5 or 6 children, the toxins from that baby for 9 months in that baby's body is going back to the mother's liver for filtering. And, the placenta filters a certain amount of that, but not totally. The mother's liver is responsible for it. And if you're not cleansing and you're not living a cleansing lifestyle during your pregnancy, then that baby's liver is going to become toxic, and that baby's going to be born with allergies. That baby's going to be born with mood behavior function problems. That baby's going to be born hyper. It's really, really interesting to see people look at Jacob. And I've had people come up to me and say, boy, he's a hyper, when isn't he? And I said, no, he's not hyper, he's healthy. Don't mislabel health and energy for hyperactivity. So there is a big difference, and that's something that it's amazing to me that people today in America do not understand what a healthy child should look like and how a healthy child should act. Depression is not just an emotional byproduct of past trauma. And this is another misconception that I see with so many people out there. I see it with psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors all the time that are labeling it past trauma. Depression starts in the colon and the liver. How long should we do a colon and liver cleanse? And how do we know when our liver and colon is clean? I feel at this time to say this. As long as we're alive in today's environment, we will never experience a clean colon and liver. Now that may be a bold statement, but that's where I stand. I feel that Mary and I are probably as faithful and as committed and diligent about cleansing as anyone out there that you'll meet or know, and we don't quit cleaning a single day. We vary it from fast to cleansing, to fast to cleansing, to maintaining, fast cleansing. But even in our maintaining, we don't put stuff in our body that pollutes our body. And so, we're not adding to that in the sense of what we're eating and drinking, but we're still subject to all the things out there environmentally that everyone else is. And our body takes it in, goes right to the liver. Now, to help you to visualize this a little bit, just know that 3 pints of blood passes through your liver every 60 seconds. 3 pints of blood through your liver every 60 seconds. Now, knowing that your blood is what's carrying all of this debris and waste, and where does it go? It goes into the liver, and it deposits it, and it picks it back up, and it carries it on. If your liver is overloaded, it blocks it right there, and all your blood is doing is just bringing it in and carrying it right back out, bringing it in and carrying it right back out. 3 pints of blood every 60 seconds. All right, so that'll give you a little bit more of an indication of why I'm really belaboring this issue about cleansing the liver. If you want to be at your ideal weight, you focus on the liver, and you'll be there. All of the dieting, all the fad diets, all the stuff. Yes, people have lost lots of weight on these fad diets, and you see their pictures in the magazines, their before and after. But you know what's interesting? You never see the picture of that same person 5 years later. You never see the picture of that same person 1 year after that fad diet took off 60 pounds. Why? Have you ever asked yourself? Well, doing a little survey on that, and a lot of you are familiar with the challenge, enter this 12-week competition, get into shape, win $100,000, go to Acapulco, whatever. Well, when I started looking into it 3 years ago, and I did the challenge, I placed in the top 6% of 77,000 people that entered that contest at that time. And that's what got me doing what I'm doing today. I wanted to learn, I wanted to experience, I wanted to see what worked, what didn't work. Because of that, and because of associating with a lot of those folks, I've stayed in touch with several of them over the years. It's been fascinating that the ones that I've stayed in touch with and talked to, and the ones they've stayed in touch with and talked to, there's not a single one of them at the same weight. They've all gone back to where they were. Why? Because of incorrect principles. Now, Mary says the reason that I didn't win the contest was because I didn't use their products. And if anyone's participated in that program, that was one of the requirements. You had to use their product. Well, in order to qualify, I went down to the health food store and I bought their products. After the competition was over, I took the products all back. But it was a concept that depleted the body of nutrients. And yes, a lot of people lost a lot of weight, made a lot of significant changes. And I'm not saying everybody went back to where they did. I'm just telling you the ones that I talked to and communicated with, and to this day have gone backwards. Because nothing was ever stressed about diet, nothing was ever stressed about cleansing. And when you look at their products, preservatives and artificial sweeteners and aspartame and artificial colorings, and tell it was unreal. All of those things block and plug the liver, overload the liver. Now, when you bring your body into balance by cleansing the liver and building the liver, then you accomplish the very desires of your heart, and that's arriving at perfect balance. Let me share with you something that'll probably be very exciting to you. In 1996, there was a group of Anglo-Saxon and Germans that got together in Birmingham, UK, and started working on an artificial liver. And actually it started before 96. By 1996, they had perfected building an artificial liver. Now, an adult liver weighs between 2.8 and 3.5 pounds. This artificial liver that they built was 5 ounces. The only thing that the artificial liver would not do was produce bile. And so that was a problem. But they kept working with it. And by 1999, they had perfected the liver to the point where it would produce bile. By the year of 2000, they did their first liver transplant with the artificial liver. 1 year later, after the transplant, they were able to go in and remove it. And here's what happened that was most interesting. In this study, and some of this research is coming out now, they take 3 ounces of human liver cells and they culture it in the laboratory. And then they designed this titanium ring that they put inside this liver culture. And this titanium ring has a device inside to direct the secretions and biles and enzymes and flow and filtering of the blood. It is so effective now that they, as of last year, they're taking patients who are in line for liver transplants and disconnecting the liver, implanting this artificial liver, hooking it up, and in 3 to 6 months, the liver that was totally degenerated, that was going to be taken out of the body, has completely regrown to a perfectly healthy, normal liver. So they take the artificial liver out, reconnect the natural liver, and the patient's off to the races with a healthy liver. Now, folks, that is so profound and so significant. And when I learned this and got this research last year, I would just, yes! That was why the ancient people, the old people today, live and have the longevity they have. Because every single culture that I've studied, every one of these people fast every year for 30 days. What are they doing? They unburden the liver and allow the liver to regenerate. And this is what came out of this study, that the human liver has the ability to totally rejuvenate itself in 90 days to a normal, healthy liver. All we have to do is just take the burden off from it. And we Americans, we eat like hogs at a trough, and we just overload and overload and overload. Not to mention the chemical shampoo, the chemical soap, the chemical toothpaste, all the poisons in the air that we're breathing and that's attaching to our skin, absorbing in through the dermis shield and going into the blood and going to the liver and depositing itself. We have taxed the liver and taxed it and plugged it till no wonder we can't function. No wonder we can't recall where we left our husband. Okay? So if we start learning to unburden the liver, and I have taught this for years, fast 24 hours once a week. I knew the value, but I wasn't making the total connection. And it's unburdening the liver. Mary just finished a 21-day fast 2 weeks ago. And we do a 21 to a 30-day fast every single year. And we do a lot of short time fasts, a week here, 10 days there, just unburdening the liver. I can't afford to be down. I've got too much to do. So you know how much more you can get done? How much more you can accomplish? And who wants to spend their time sick anyway? Yuck. What a waste of human potential. Okay? So let's look at that and let's take this serious about cleansing. And imagine a liver totally regenerated without trauma, memory. What might that do to someone's depression level? Is that a possibility? I think so. I think so. Okay.
Thank you, Gary.